guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. It's so greatly appreciated. Truly is. Before we get started, let me give you my usual disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes only. Please do not take what I say as fact. Please always do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Next, if you've not liked, subscribed, or commented yet, please consider doing so. It really helps me out and I really appreciate it. Okay, so today we're talking about Malcolm John Webster. He was found guilty of killing his first wife, Claire Morris, and attempting to kill his second wife, Brenda Grant, and his fiancée, Simone Banerjee. So with that, let's get started. Malcolm John Webster was born on April 18th, 1958 in Wandsworth, England, to parents Alexander and Odette. Dad was originally from a very strict family in Scotland. He was a detective in charge of the fraud squad at the Metropolitan Police Service in London, eventually holding the rank of Detective Chief Superintendent. Mom Odette was a police officer, which is how Mom and Dad met, before becoming a nurse and then eventually settling into life as a housewife. The couple married in 1952 and went on to have 3 children together. The oldest, Ian, followed by twins, Malcolm and Carolyn. His father was very strict and he had certain rules set in place that most would find extremely odd. For instance, the entire family would have to vacate the home when Alexander needed to use the bathroom. And this rule actually followed Malcolm into his adult years. Along with this, the children were not allowed to speak at the dinner table. Alexander felt that because he worked so extremely hard all day, he deserved silence at dinner. I think we all work extremely hard all day, but it is nice to come together at dinner as a family and discuss our day and what is going on in our lives, but that's just my opinion. Along with this, Malcolm was very attention seeking and at the bottom of the pecking order in his father's world. As a child, he would often pretend to faint. He seldom interacted with other children, and he was known by his peers as a pyro, or somebody that purposefully starts fires. This name was given to him at the age of 7 because he loved to show off his fire setting skills. He enjoyed setting bushes and trash cans on fire and often used nail polish remover as an accelerant. It's said that he pretended to have asthma, brain tumors, and epilepsy as a way to garner sympathy from others, including his parents. He lied about getting cancer as a teenager and had random jobs that included a nurse, a trash collector, a taxi driver, and a file clerk. When he was in his teens, he would lie to girlfriends about having leukemia, heart problems, and cancer. His first girlfriend would end up becoming pregnant when the pair was just 15 years old. Malcolm asked her to get rid of the baby, to which she obliged, and this would actually happen at a backstreet clinic. Malcolm was also working for the girl's father at this time, but would end up being let go from the company for stealing. After high school, he decided to train to become a nurse. The fact that he faked so many illnesses most likely played a huge role in this decision. What better career, right? Malcolm's first love would end up unaliving herself, and even though police looked into her death decades later, they never found any sort of proof that linked him to her death. After the death of his first love, Malcolm began seeing a woman that was 8 years his senior and married. He would end up falling in love with this woman, but ultimately she would choose to stay with her husband. Malcolm took the ending of this relationship quite hard, and he decided to travel after its demise. So over the next decade, he traveled to New Zealand, Australia, and the Middle East. While there, he worked with Aboriginal children in the United Arab Emirates at the Tawam Children's Hospital in Abu Dhabi. He would later be forced to resign from the position following an investigation into the deaths of 3 children who died under his care. The children all died from cardiac failure, which is very uncommon, but unfortunately, there was little to no evidence that he was responsible for their deaths. An ex-coworker of his named Beth Brown, who was actually sleeping with him at the time, would later come out to say that their bosses believed that Malcolm was injecting the children with insulin. September 3rd, 1993, Malcolm married his first wife, 32-year-old Claire Morris, from Old Meldrum, Aberdeenshire, in a traditional Scottish wedding. Claire was a happy girl who was very close to her family. She would sadly lose her father when she was about 9 years old, which I'm sure changed her as a person. She would go on to become a nurse who specialized in eye care. Becoming a state registered nurse was something that was very important to Claire, and she took this job extremely seriously. Malcolm and Claire would meet at a house party in London, and the pair hit it off almost immediately. Malcolm would shower Claire with flowers and gifts, but after the wedding, things changed almost immediately. Malcolm made Claire take out 12 life insurance policies and a very big mortgage insurance policy. Along with this, he made Claire make him the beneficiary of her policies. This didn't raise any red flags, though, as it is completely normal to make your husband or your wife your sole beneficiary. In the spring of 1994, Claire began to feel ill. She started becoming tired, confused, and forgetful. Malcolm would downplay her illnesses, and it would later come out that he was drugging her with temazepam. For context, temazepam is a drug that is used to treat insomnia. It can cause paranoid or unaliving ideation, impair memory, judgment, or condition. May 27th, 1994, 8 months after their wedding, Malcolm forced Claire to take a ride with him to drop off some paperwork about 16 miles away in Aberdeen. While on the way there, Malcolm lost control of the car. He went into a ditch, and the car hit a tree on Claire's side. Good Samaritans came by to see if they could help. They asked Malcolm if anybody else was in the car, to which he replied no. This question was actually asked more than just once, and he repeatedly replied that no, there was no other person in the car other than himself, up until the car burst into flames. Claire's skull was welded to the back of the chair, and her bones were welded to the seat. Malcolm told officers that he swerved to avoid hitting a motorcyclist, yet there were no skid marks or signs of the car jerking. He played the grieving widow so well that nobody ever questioned foul play, and in fact, her family was comforting him at Claire's funeral.
Microphone on.
He married Claire Morris in 1993 in Aberdeen, but was already planning to kill her and take her money. He'd already made her sign over her estate to him, and 8 months later, he drugged her, put her in the car, drove it off the road, and set it on fire. For 17 years, her family believed it was an accident that only Malcolm Webster had survived.
After Claire's death, Malcolm cashed in on £200,000, which is about 252,000 US dollars. And he would go through this money in about 6 months. After the death of Claire, Malcolm would meet a nurse by the name Felicity Drum at a dinner party in her native home of Saudi Arabia. He showered her with chocolates and flowers, and just 8 months after meeting, in January of 1997, Malcolm proposed to Felicity. April 26, 1997, Malcolm and Felicity would marry in St. Andrew's Church in Milford, New Zealand. Shortly after their marriage, strange things began to happen. Things that almost mirrored his marriage to Claire. The newlyweds decided to honeymoon at Cook's Beach on the Coromandel Peninsula. On the first night of their honeymoon, Malcolm gave Felicity a drink that made her sleep for 36 hours, and gave her a drink on a separate occasion that made her sleep for 18 hours. When Felicity finally came to, she was shocked. Nothing like this had ever happened before, and Felicity was a fairly healthy woman. Felicity's symptoms of fatigue continued long after the honeymoon, followed by blackouts, headaches, and double vision. This bothered her so much that she sought medical attention by a doctor with more than 45 years' experience. She also complained to him about everything she ate having a bitter taste to it. The doctor originally diagnosed her with a vertebral migraine, but wanted to run more tests to rule out epilepsy or a brain tumor. About this time, Malcolm had gotten a new job in Scotland, and the two were planning to relocate. 2 days before they were ready for the big move, Felicity gets a call from her doctor about a recent blood test she had done. The doctor told her that the test showed an issue with Felicity's liver and that she was displaying the same characteristics of a woman that had been slipped the date R-word drug. In May of 1997, the couple moved to Easter Letter Cottage to start their new life together. A few months into living in Scotland, Felicity told Malcolm that she was pregnant with his baby. But instead of being over the moon excited like Felicity expected, Malcolm was pissed about the pregnancy. He basically gave her a laundry list of reasons why she should not have this child, focusing mainly on how expensive children are. Throughout Felicity's pregnancy, she would have the same strange symptoms she complained about right after her marriage. At just 16 weeks pregnant, she would sleep for long periods of time, slur her words, and lose her balance. She became so concerned about the health of her unborn child that she demanded more tests be run. Unfortunately, the only conclusion that doctors could come to was that Felicity was stressed about the move and about the pregnancy. In September of 1997, Felicity returned to half of her home on fire. Malcolm was already there, of course he was, and told her not to worry about anything because they were going to get the insurance money for the home. In May of 1998, Felicity gave birth to the couple's baby, a son that they decided to name Edward. After the birth of baby Edward, the couple decided to move to New Zealand so that Felicity could be closer to her family. They put all of their important belongings and documents into Shore Porters Society, a huge storage unit in Aberdeen that is well known and highly respected. November 12, 1998, the facility is set ablaze. It would burn for days and take 80 firefighters to finally extinguish it. There were more than $9.7 million in damages because this is a bunch of people's storage units that go up in flames. Then, after an extensive investigation, it is determined that workmen repairing the roof left a hot gas blowtorch on the roof, which ended up igniting. Oddly enough, though, Malcolm had been there just moments before the blaze, retrieving paperwork from his storage unit. Owners of the Shore Porter Society have always denied that their workers had anything to do with this fire, but it was never treated as suspicious. It is believed that the fire was never looked into further because Malcolm's daddy took care of it. In late 1998, Felicity and Malcolm moved in with her parents while they waited to close on their dream home. Webster and Felicity pooled their money together for the sale of this home. Malcolm was supposed to sell his cottage in Aberdeenshire, and Felicity sold her mortgage-free home in order for the couple to put a huge down payment on this house. Malcolm then began telling her that he was having trouble coming up with his share of the money. This dragged on up until the point that Felicity was about to lose her $60,000 deposit that she had put on the house from the sale of her old home. Then in February of 1999, Felicity's dream home, the home that she was going to raise her family in, went up in flames. An investigation into the fire would determine that somebody had put papers through the mailbox and set them on fire. A few days later, in the middle of the night, an armchair in the home of Felicity's parents' house goes up in flames. Felicity grabs the baby and runs out of the house while her father tries to extinguish the flames with buckets of water. February 12th, 1999. It's the deadline to sign the papers for the home. And despite the fire, Felicity wanted to go through with the sale of the house. Because Malcolm was never able to come up with a share of the money, Felicity's father gave them some of his life savings, after Malcolm assured him that the money would be there shortly. The couple get into Felicity's Honda Accord and it's off to the lawyer's office they go. As they were driving, Malcolm began complaining about the steering in the car, telling Felicity that it's not working right. Malcolm was weaving back and forth at high rates of speed, but when Felicity grabbed the wheel, she said there was nothing wrong with the steering. The car would end up in a ditch, but surprisingly had very little damage to it. She says that Malcolm jumped out of the car and told Felicity to stay inside because it was too dangerous out there, but Felicity refused. She insisted that because the car was still drivable, she wanted to continue heading towards the lawyers to sign the papers. Because remember, she has $60,000 on the line. This is when Malcolm clutches his heart and claims that he's having a heart attack. He begged her to go to the hospital with him, and even though she was risking losing all of her money, she would not be able to live with herself if something awful had happened to her husband. So Felicity got into the ambulance and went with her husband, who was grabbing his chest. February 18th, 1999, 6 days after the incident, Malcolm tells Felicity that the money he was waiting on had finally came and that they could go sign the papers for their dream home. He then told Felicity to get their son dressed because he was going to take the three of them on a special picnic to celebrate. As Felicity was driving to the picnic spot, Malcolm gave her a drink to keep her fluids up. Felicity took the drink and said that's the last thing she remembers. The next thing she knows, she's in the passenger seat of the car and her cell phone is ringing. She steps out of the car and she finds herself in a pitch black forest. She looked up and saw Malcolm pushing their son in his stroller about 300 yards away. She called her father back and he told her that she needed to get home immediately and that no matter what Malcolm said to her, get home now. So Felicity shouts for Malcolm, who yells back at her, "What the hell are you doing awake? You need to go back to sleep. I was just going for a walk." She forces Malcolm to take her home, fearing that something terrible had happened to one of her family members. When they pulled into the driveway of her sister's home, Malcolm looked at her and said, "Your dad's going to tell you a lot of nonsense about me and your money." He told her that all of her money was gone and that Malcolm was the one that had stolen it. When Felicity got back to her parents' home, she looked in the trunk of the car and she found that it was filled with wood, newspapers, and petrol oil. And it was at that moment that everything clicked for her. Malcolm had her that day. He was pushing their son a far enough distance away so that he would be safe when Malcolm went back and lit the car on fire with Felicity inside of it. The same way that he had killed his first wife, Claire. He was the one that was her all along, even while she was pregnant with their baby. Felicity says that she owes her life to her father. Not only did he begin looking into Malcolm after his daughter's sudden blackouts, but it was his phone call that woke Felicity up from that deep sleep before Malcolm had the chance to set the car ablaze. Can you imagine? Can you freaking imagine? Nobody's safe out there. When Felicity and her father looked into Malcolm further, the hits just kept on coming. Malcolm had written emails to a real estate agent planning to escape New Zealand and move back to the UK with him and his infant son. The emails never mention his wife because she was supposed to be dead. They also found a briefcase that contained 9 insurance documents totaling $1.9 million that had Felicity's signature on them. The only problem was that Felicity had never signed those papers. So it's at that very moment that Felicity realizes that her husband was trying to kill her. And that moment in the woods was supposed to be her last moments on Earth. If he had successfully killed Felicity, he would have cashed in on $750,000 in life insurance payments and tens of thousands of pounds in insurance claims for the fires he had started. Instead, he fled once again and he ignored 4 court appearances. So now police are on to Malcolm, but without any real evidence. The only thing that they can do is watch him and slowly build a case against him. During this time, he would meet and become engaged to a woman named Simone Banerjee. He met Simone while she was working for a hospital. She was actually in the process of looking to purchase a 300,000-pound house. He tells Simone that he has no children, but that he longs for a family. Simone was a nurse, and she had no idea about her future husband's crooked past. He would tell Simone that he had leukemia and he was going for treatments out of town. He begged Simone to move in with him because she was the only person that could make him feel better. So she obliged. He even returned from treatments with his head shaved and his eyebrows shaved. The truth was that Malcolm never had leukemia or any other form of cancer. And to those of you that are suffering from cancer, have somebody that you love that is suffering from cancer, or have lost somebody that you love from cancer, I am so sorry that you have to hear about a person faking such a serious and deadly disease that destroys so many lives, that has destroyed mine as well. In 2006, Simone changes her will and leaves everything to Malcolm. Malcolm claims that he has done the same for her, even though she never sees the paperwork. But this is her future husband and the love of her life. She has no reason not to believe him, right? Malcolm's health all of a sudden starts to get much better after Simone changes her will. So the couple plan a getaway on Malcolm's yacht. the yacht that he purchased with one of the 12 life insurance policies that he had Claire take out before her death. So during this whole time, police are still watching him. And now that they have word about a trip on a boat, they know they have to move quickly. Because, okay, if you find yourself in the middle of an ocean with a murderer, there's a pretty good chance that you're not coming home. They also know that while Simone believed Malcolm was receiving his chemo treatments, he was really taking mini vacations with one of his 3 girlfriends with the money that he stole from Felicity. So police decide to send her an Osmond letter. What the hell is an Osmond letter, right? That's what I thought. That's the first thing I said. What the fuck is an Osmond letter? Okay. It's a warning of a death threat or a risk of murder issued by the British police or authorities to a prospective victim. Simone can't believe what she is reading, and she decides to confront Malcolm with these allegations. Malcolm turns white, packs a bag, and leaves the home. I guess that's one way to handle it. Could have been worse. Let's be honest. She could have been a goner as well, so. If this wasn't proof enough, she then finds her life jacket that she was planning on using for the trip, and it has a hole in it. The police still needed stronger proof than what they had, though, before they could arrest him. That's when they realized that doctors who performed the autopsy on Claire still had pieces of her liver left over in forensics. Through advances in science, doctors are able to test a small piece of Claire's liver tissue from 1984. What they find is that her liver had strong doses of temazepam in it. And this is not something that the body naturally generates. So it would have to be planted there either by Claire herself or by somebody slipping it to her. This was never prescribed to Claire, but it was prescribed to Malcolm. February 1st, 2011, Malcolm Webster begins his trial almost 2 decades after the murder of Claire. On May 19th, 2011, after just 4 hours of deliberation, a jury found Malcolm guilty of the murder of Claire, the attempted second murder of Felicity, arson, theft, fraud, drugging, and attempted bigamy. Malcolm was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years.
5 years and a move to New Zealand later, he tried but failed to do the same thing to Felicity Drum. Only when police began investigating that did they find Webster was also setting up Oban nurse Simone Banerjee for the same fate. She was in court to see him jailed and branded by the judge as a danger to women.
I'd just like to say that I'm very pleased that this matter is now at an end. I am really sorry for Peter and his family that they still have ongoing things about Claire's grave, but for the rest of us, I'm very pleased that the outcome of today was as it was.
Do you feel lucky to be alive?
Very much so. Thank you. That's it for today.
In court today, Judge Lord Bannatyne said Webster was cold-blooded, brutal and callous. The crimes carried out for the base motive of financial gain, but the 6-figure sums Webster made have all vanished. The court heard he cannot pay compensation to his victims or their family.
Malcolm Webster's trial would end up being the longest trial in Scottish history. He is serving out his sentence at Shotts Prison in Lanarkshire and still maintains his innocence. In 2011, Malcolm claimed that while doing his time at the prison, he was attacked by another inmate with a metal pole. Following further attacks by inmates, Malcolm refused to shower for months on end and decided to hire a former inmate who was in there for touching a child to protect him from these attacks. All right, guys, if you're still here, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you and I appreciate you so, so, so very much. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you haven't yet. And until next time, stay safe out there.